Just imagine, you are standing in the back of a stadium as the basketball halftime performance occurs. 100 dancing senior ladies come out on the dance floor to dance to country songs, and the crowd roars. This is where the story of the sound wave starts. The loud noises of the crowd and the music first hit the outer ear. Using localizing techniques from azimuth, elevation, and distance estimation, the outer ear helps the brain understand where the sound is coming from. The sound wave bounces around the helix, cavum concha, tragus, and antihelix to enter into the external auditory meatus. As the sound enters the auditory canal, more protective measures are taken, but not just against sound. Hair and wax build in the cartilaginous portion to protect against bacteria, fungi, and water. The isthmus in the cartilaginous portion is another protection and another barrier before the tympanic membrane. Once it twists, the canal enters the bone portion. Next up in line is the middle ear. A brief overview: sound hits the tympanic membrane where the acoustical energy is turned into mechanical energy. Then the energy hits each ossicle and bam, the stapes makes contact with the oval window and the sound enters the inner ear. Let's take a look at each part. The tympanic membrane is the eardrum. As the sound hits the membrane, energy is forced into the cone shape in a buckling effect, hitting the umbo of the malleus behind it. This increases pressure, which is important for overcoming the impedance barrier between air and water in the cochlea. More on that later. After the sound hits the umbo, the energy travels through the ossicles quickly. As it travels, the sound pressure builds. This, plus an effect called the ossicular lever, increases pressure. Along with the buckling effect, the increased pressure is just enough to overcome the impedance in the inner ear. The added pressure is just enough to allow us to hear. Which brings us to the cochlea. Super intricate and about the size of a pea, this is the real deal. Sound initially enters the cochlea through the oval window vestibula and then the scala vestibuli. It travels through the perilymph where it turns around in the cochlea at the apex to travel down the scala tympani, all while exciting the basilar membrane. With the movement of the basilar membrane, the inner and outer hair cells move up and down. Two theories play into this. With place theory, the basilar membrane is excited in a specific part based on the frequency response. High frequencies respond at the base, while low frequencies respond at the apex. Temporal theory tells that larger frequencies excite hair cells more, creating a different response than a lower frequency. With both theories, the excitement of the basilar membrane pushes the hair cells against the tectorial membrane. When the inner hair cells are pushed against the tectorial membrane, the stereocilia shear. Shearing allows for potassium to enter the cell, which opens channels for calcium to move in, which then depolarizes the cell, creating an action potential. Neurotransmitters move to the afferent nerve and are sent to the brain. Outer hair cells help the inner hair cells by amplifying the signal. When they are depolarized, it is called electromotility. The increased amplitude helps your brain better understand and hear the sound. Without the outer hair cells, sound might be deadened and you wouldn't be able to hear as well. With the signals from the outer and inner hair cells, your brain is ready to process the signal. After the inner ear processes the sound and turns the sound into a neurotransmitter, the neuron signal transfers through the vestibulocochlear nerve towards the brain. Several transfers occur. First, let's look at the brain. The sound is going to travel along the medulla, pons, midbrain, thalamus, and finally to the cortex or the corpus callosum. In each of these areas, the brain processes the signal in place and temporal coding, such as where the sound is coming from and how big the frequency response is. As the signal travels through the different areas of the brain, you see tonotopic organization. For example, there is both a primary and secondary auditory cortex responses with each processing signal. Higher and lower frequencies respond in different areas, and Heschl's gyrus, Heschl's sulcus, and the superior temporal gyrus also process different frequencies. Now back to the signal. As the nerve signal begins heading towards the brain, it is first found in the cochlear nucleus. In these nuclei, neurons synapse and process signals, refining the auditory signals received. As the signal travels along, the different nuclei use place and temporal coding with timing, frequency, and intensity staying the same throughout the whole process. Tonotopic organization also exists here, and different nuclei respond better to different sounds. The cochlear nucleus is also known for the different firing patterns, such as the chopper and pauser patterns. Patterns help in the differentiation process. From the cochlear nucleus, sound travels to the superior olivary complex. At the SOC, this information crosses over, allowing for hearing information from both ears to converge. Bringing the two sounds together in binaural processing, sound localization happens. The superior olivary complex can sense the weakness of sound neurons from one ear, then another, allowing the brain to know which direction to turn towards the sound. Sound from the SOC translates to the lateral lemniscus, which is able to correctly pass sound from the SOC to the inferior colliculus. The inferior colliculus in the midbrain works specifically with signal integration, frequency recognition, and pitch discrimination. It processes sound from both ears and integrates the different audio signals to filter out sounds from vocalizing, breathing, and chewing activities. After the inferior colliculus, the sound signal transfers to the thalamus to the medial geniculate nucleus. The medial geniculate nucleus processes sound signal and prepares it to the auditory cortex of the brain. The MGN also works with the lateral geniculate nucleus, which processes vision, to relay more information to the brain. Finally, the signal makes it to the auditory cortex. The auditory cortex contains the tonotopic organization that we learned about earlier. The auditory cortex focuses on sound awareness, perception, processing auditory objects, and localization. Deals with hemispheric specialization and helps understand melody and rhythm. One of the biggest advantages of the auditory cortex is that it connects to other parts of the brain. This way, other systems such as the motor, optic, speech, and emotional systems can react as well to the sound. The process is very quick. Electrocochleography with fast auditory evoked potentials help assess just how fast this occurs. With electrocochleography, audiologists can understand the hearing response of the brain. These all happen within milliseconds, so the brain can react quickly to every sound you hear. And it all starts with the ear, a small flap of skin that leads to the fastest human sense in the body.